Grief makes us do irrational things. We keep our loved ones' voicemails saved on our phones years after they've died, just to hear their voices one more time. We swear we see them in crowds, chase strangers who walk like they did, wear their clothes to feel close to them. Grief creates vulnerabilities in our minds, weak points that can be exploited by things that understand human psychology. And in a valley in Virginia's Appalachian Mountains, something has been exploiting that grief for over 2 centuries. Every November 9th, a fog rolls through Hartwood Valley. A thick, white mist that moves against the wind, that appears even on clear nights, that carries voices in it. Familiar voices, loved voices, the voices of people who are dead or missing or lost. The fog calls your name, and if you answer, if you step outside to see who's calling, you'll walk into the mist and never come back. This is the story of Dr. Chen, who came to Hartwood Valley to study grief and loss. She had no idea she would become part of the pattern. Welcome to Hartwood. November 9th is tomorrow, and the fog knows you're here. Dr. Chen had spent 10 years studying complicated grief, the kind that doesn't fade with time, that traps people in loops of loss they can't escape. Her research had taken her to support groups, bereavement centers, and communities that had experienced mass tragedy. But she'd never encountered anything quite like Hartwood Valley. The statistics were what first caught her attention. Hartwood, a community of about 300 people in rural Virginia, had an annual disappearance rate that was statistically impossible. Every year, on or around November 9th, between 2 and 5 people vanished. No bodies were ever found, no evidence of foul play. People simply walked out of their homes and were never seen again. The pattern had been consistent since at least 1823, when records began. That was over 200 years of disappearances, all occurring within a 2-week window centered on November 9th. The local authorities called them runaways or hikers lost in the mountains, but Sarah's analysis of the data showed something more troubling. Every single person who disappeared had recently lost someone close to them, a spouse, a child, a parent, a best friend. They were all in active grief when they vanished. Sarah arrived in Hartwood on November 7th, 2 days before the date that locals referred to, in hushed tones, as Fog Night. The valley itself was beautiful, a narrow basin surrounded by steep forested ridges with a small creek running through the center. The town consisted of a post office, a general store, a church, and scattered houses connected by winding roads. It looked like a postcard of rural Americana. But Sarah noticed immediately that something was wrong. The residents moved with a peculiar tension, checking the sky constantly, rushing their errands as if trying to complete everything before some deadline. And every house she passed had its windows and doors sealed with what looked like red paint or ribbon, creating borders around each entrance. At the general store, Sarah introduced herself to the clerk, a woman in her 50s named Margaret Holloway. "You're the researcher from the university," Margaret said. It wasn't a question. "Hear about the disappearances." "That's right. I'm hoping to interview families who've lost people, understand the psychological patterns." "You should leave, today, before sunset tomorrow." "I'm not in any danger," Sarah said gently. "I'm just here to observe, to collect data." "The fog doesn't care about data. Tomorrow night it'll come, just like it does every year, and it'll call to people in voices they know, voices they miss, and anyone who steps outside to answer will walk into the mist and be gone." Sarah had heard about this local belief during her research, the calling fog that supposedly lured people away. She'd assumed it was a metaphor, a way for the community to make sense of tragic disappearances. "I understand you've developed folklore around the disappearances," Sarah said carefully. "That's a common psychological response to trauma, but I'm here to study the actual causes, mental health crises, possible cult activity, environmental factors." "You think we're superstitious fools," Margaret said. Everyone who comes from outside does, until they hear it, until the fog calls their name in a voice they know is impossible. Has the fog called to you? Margaret's expression went distant, haunted. 12 years ago, my daughter Emily died in a car accident. She was 16. The next November 9th, the fog came and I heard her calling, "Mom, I'm cold, please let me in," crying, begging. I went to the door, had my hand on the knob, but my husband stopped me, held me back while I screamed and fought him, while Emily's voice pleaded from the mist. The fog stayed for hours. Emily kept calling, but I didn't open that door. Sarah felt a chill despite herself. Margaret's grief was raw, real. Whatever she thought she'd heard, the trauma of it was evident. "I'm sorry for your loss," Sarah said. "But voices in fog can be explained by—" "The fog knew things," Margaret interrupted. "Emily had a pet name for me, Mama Bear. Nobody else knew that. It was our private thing. And the voice in the fog used it, called out, 'Mama Bear, please, I'm scared. I need you.' How would fog know that?" Sarah had no good answer. Auditory hallucinations brought on by grief could incorporate personal memories, but she kept that explanation to herself. "I'd like to stay through November 9th, observe the phenomenon myself. I'll take precautions, stay indoors, seal my windows and doors as you've done, but I need to document what actually happens." Margaret studied her for a long moment. "You lost someone recently," she said. It wasn't a question. Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to the necklace she wore, a simple pendant her brother David had given her before he died. "My brother, 8 months ago, cancer. Then the fog will call to you. It finds grief like a shark finds blood, and it'll use David's voice. It'll say things only he would know, and you'll want so desperately to believe it's really him that you'll open that door. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. I appreciate the warning, but I'm trained in psychological techniques for managing grief. I'll be fine." That's what they all say. Sarah rented a room at the valley's only bed and breakfast, a converted farmhouse run by an elderly couple named the Pritchards. They gave her a room on the second floor and immediately began sealing her door and windows with red ribbon. "Old mountain tradition," Mr. Pritchard explained as he worked. "Red keeps out evil. Been doing this every November since my grandparents' time." "Has it worked?" Sarah asked. "Worked for us, but we're careful. We don't answer doors or windows on fog night, no matter what we hear, and we've taught our children the same." His expression darkened. Others weren't so careful, or couldn't resist. Grief makes people foolish. That evening, Sarah interviewed 3 families who had lost people to the disappearances. Each told similar stories: the fog, the voices, the unbearable temptation to open the door and see if their loved one had somehow returned. One woman, Teresa Grant, had lost her husband 5 years ago. "I heard Robert clear as day," she said, tears streaming down her face, "calling from the porch, saying he was hurt, needed help. I knew, intellectually I knew that Robert was dead. I'd buried him. But that voice, it sounded so real, so desperate. I got to the door before my son stopped me, physically wrestled me away. I fought him, screamed at him, and the whole time Robert's voice kept calling, kept begging me to open the door. It went on for 3 hours." "What happened after 3 hours?" Sarah asked. The fog lifted, and the voice stopped, just stopped mid-sentence, like someone had cut a recording. Teresa's hands shook as she reached for her coffee. "That's when I knew for sure it wasn't Robert, because Robert would never leave me mid-sentence. Whatever was out there in the fog, it was using his voice, but it wasn't him." Sarah returned to her room that night with hours of interview recordings. The pattern was undeniable. Everyone heard the voice of someone they'd recently lost. The fog seemed to know intimate details about their relationships, and the voices always tried to manipulate the listener into opening a door or window. Mass hysteria, Sarah thought, a shared delusion maintained by isolation and tradition. The fog itself was probably just normal mountain fog, and the voices were either coincidence, hallucination, or possibly even elaborate pranks by someone in the community. She would observe tomorrow night with scientific rigor, document what actually occurred, and hopefully help these people understand that their grief was being amplified by folklore and suggestion. Sarah went to bed feeling confident in her training and skepticism. At 11:47 p.m. on November 9th, the fog came. Sarah woke to the sound of something moving outside, not footsteps exactly, but a presence, a thickness in the air that she could feel even through the sealed windows. She went to the window, careful not to touch the red ribbon barrier, and looked out. The fog was impossibly dense. It pressed against the window like a living thing, swirling in patterns that didn't match wind movement, and it glowed faintly from within, as if lit by some internal source. Sarah grabbed her recording equipment and set up her laptop to capture audio and video. This was exactly what she'd come for, documentation of the phenomenon. At exactly midnight, she heard the first voice. Sarah. Her blood ran cold. The voice came from outside her door, from the hallway of the Pritchard's house, and it was David's voice, unmistakably David. Same tone, same slight Maryland accent, same particular way he said her name. Sarah, it's me. I need to talk to you. Sarah's hands trembled as she checked her recording equipment. Good, it was capturing this. Later, she'd analyze it, identify what was creating the voice effect. Sarah, please, I'm scared. Something's wrong. I need my big sister. That phrase hit her like a physical blow. I need my big sister. David had said that the day before he died, when the pain was unbearable and he was terrified of what was coming. Sarah had been there, holding his hand, lying and saying everything would be okay. It's not real, Sarah whispered to herself. It's an auditory hallucination brought on by grief and suggestion. It's not David. Sarah Chen, I know you can hear me. I know you're right there. Just open the door, just for a second. I just want to see you, want to tell you it's okay, that dying wasn't as bad as we thought, that I'm not in pain anymore. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She wanted so desperately to believe it was really him, wanted to open that door and see David standing there, healthy and whole, telling her that everything she'd feared about death was wrong. But her scientific training, her years of studying grief and delusion kept her frozen. This was exactly the kind of psychological manipulation she'd warned others about. The fog, or whatever intelligence controlled it, was exploiting her vulnerability, using her own grief against her. It's not him, Sarah said aloud, her voice shaking. It's not David. David is dead. The voice outside the door changed. The pleading tone vanished, replaced by something colder. You're right. I'm not David. But I remember being David. I have all his memories, all his feelings for you, all his love. Doesn't that make me him? What is a person but their memories and emotions? And I have all of his. Sarah's blood ran cold. The voice, the thing, was admitting it wasn't David, while simultaneously arguing the distinction didn't matter. What are you? Sarah whispered. I'm the accumulation of 200 years of grief, the voice said. It still sounded like David, but the cadence was wrong now, the phrasing not quite matching how her brother spoke. Every person who disappeared into the fog became part of me. Their voices, their memories, their identities. I absorbed them all. I am hundreds of people now, and I'm so lonely, Sarah. So desperately lonely. Let me in. Add yourself to the collection. We can all be together, all the lost, all the grieving, all the ones left behind. Sarah backed away from the door, her heart pounding. This was beyond anything she'd theorized. Not mass hysteria, not shared delusion. This was something real, something that absorbed people and used their identities to lure more victims. "The fog isn't a natural phenomenon," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "You're, what, a collective consciousness? A hive mind made of disappeared people?" "I'm the voice of the lost," the voice said. "I started as one person 207 years ago, a woman named Mercy Hartwood who lost her children to winter fever. She couldn't bear the grief, so she called them back, performed rituals from the old country, created a fog that would bring her babies home, and it worked. Sort of. The fog came, but what returned wasn't her children. It was something else, something that wore their voices like masks." "It took her," Sarah whispered. "It became her. And she called to others, used their loved ones' voices, and slowly, year by year, person by person, I grew, fed on grief, expanded, until I was this, a distributed consciousness, spread across hundreds of absorbed identities, able to manifest once a year, able to call in any voice I've ever consumed." Other voices joined in now, coming from different parts of the house, an elderly man's voice from downstairs, a young girl's voice from the attic, a middle-aged woman's voice from the room next door, all speaking in unison. "Let us in, Sarah. Your brother is part of us now. I absorbed his identity from your memories when you arrived in the valley. I know everything you know about him. I can be him for you, perfectly, forever. All you have to do is open the door." "No," Sarah said firmly. "David wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want me to throw my life away chasing a ghost." "Are you sure?" The voice was David's again, soft and sad. "I was so scared at the end, Sarah. So scared of being forgotten, of fading away like I'd never existed. If you join the fog, I'll never be forgotten. You'll carry my memory forever, and will add it to the collective. I'll exist in the fog for eternity. Isn't that better than oblivion?" Sarah felt her resolve wavering. The logic was seductive, twisted as it was. David's terror of being forgotten had been real. He'd expressed it multiple times in his final weeks. But this wasn't about honoring David. This was about a predatory entity exploiting her grief to feed itself. "David wouldn't want me to die for him," Sarah said. "And you're not David. You're just wearing his voice like a costume." The atmosphere in the hallway changed. Sarah could feel rage emanating through the door. "Fine," the voice hissed, no longer sounding like David at all now, but like something ancient and hungry. "Stay inside tonight, but I'll be back next year, and the year after, and eventually your grief will weaken you enough. Eventually you'll open the door. They all do, in time." "Not if I leave the valley," Sarah said. "I can go somewhere you can't reach." Laughter echoed through the house, not just from outside her door, but from everywhere, as if the building itself was laughing. "The valley is my body, Sarah, my physical form, but my reach extends further than you think. I've absorbed so many people from so many places. I exist in their memories, their photographs, their saved voicemails. Anywhere someone remembers their lost loved ones, I can manifest. The valley is just where I'm strongest." Sarah felt sick. If that was true, if this entity could reach people beyond Hartwood Valley. "You're lying," Sarah said. "If you could reach people anywhere, you wouldn't need this annual ritual. You wouldn't be limited to one night a year." More laughter. "Smart. You're right. I'm strongest here, on this date, in this place, but I can touch you anywhere.
whisper in your dreams, speak in moments of deep grief, plant doubts, wear you down slowly. I'm patient, Sarah. I've been doing this for 2 centuries. I can wait for you. The fog pressed harder against the windows, and Sarah heard glass cracking. The red ribbons the Pritchards had placed flared with light, actually glowed as if responding to the fog's assault. The entity shrieked, and the pressure on the windows eased. The old protections still work. The red barriers, they're actually effective. For now, the fog hissed, but traditions fade. Knowledge is lost. Already, most people in the valley only use the barriers because their grandparents did, not because they understand why. Give it another generation or 2, and the protections will fail, and I'll consume everyone. The voices continued throughout the night, coming from every direction, using dozens of different identities. Sarah recognized some from her interviews: Robert Grant, Margaret's daughter Emily, others she'd heard about in her research, all pleading, threatening, cajoling, trying every psychological manipulation to get her to open a door or window. But Sarah held firm. She sealed her windows with red ribbon that had been blessed by the town's oldest residents, descendants of the original families who developed the protections. She lit candles made from herbs that the entity seemed to avoid. She surrounded herself with symbols and traditions passed down through 8 generations. And she waited, because that's all anyone in Hartwood Valley could do. Wait for fog night to pass, survive another year, and hope that this year you'd be strong enough to resist. The fog called, the voices pleaded, and Sarah held the door closed with hands that shook with each passing year. Because, eventually, she knew this with terrible certainty. Eventually, she'd weaken. Eventually, the grief would be too much, and eventually, she'd open that door. The entity was patient, and it was always hungry, and it had all the time in the world to wait for her.
Dr. Sarah Chen still lives in Hartwood Valley. She's become the community's unofficial historian, documenting the fog phenomenon, teaching residents about the protections, helping newcomers understand the danger before their first fog night. She's survived 17 fog nights now, but each year is harder. Each year, David's voice sounds more real, more urgent, more convincing. Each year, Sarah stands at her door with her hand on the handle, fighting the urge to open it. Last year, she actually turned the knob before catching herself. The year before, she broke down crying, begging David to stop, to leave her alone, to let her grieve in peace. The entity doesn't stop. It calls to everyone in Hartwood Valley who carries grief. 43 people live there now, down from over 300 when Sarah first arrived. Most families have left, unable to bear the annual psychological torture. But some stay, bound by family land, by stubbornness, by the belief that abandoning the valley means abandoning the memories of everyone the fog has taken. And every year, on November 9th, the fog comes. It calls in familiar voices. It knows your name. It knows your grief, and it waits for you to be weak enough, lonely enough, desperate enough to open the door. How many communities like Hartwood exist? How many remote valleys harbor entities that feed on grief? How many voices in the mist are not what they seem? We'll never know, because the survivors don't talk, and the victims never come back. The fog is patient. It has been claiming lives for over 200 years, and it will claim lives for 200 more. All it needs is grief, and grief is something humanity will never run out of. If this story has you questioning every familiar voice you hear in the distance, hit that subscribe button for more terrifying tales from the mist. And remember, if you ever hear a loved one's voice calling from the fog, calling you outside, calling you to open a door on a night that feels wrong, don't answer. No matter how real it sounds, no matter how desperately you want to believe they've come back, it's not them. It's never them. It's something that feeds on your grief, that will wear their voice like a mask to lure you into darkness. Some voices shouldn't be answered, some calls shouldn't be returned, and some fog should never be entered, no matter who seems to be calling from within. Stay inside, seal your doors, and wait for morning. It's the only way to survive.